A moral hazard exists when there is no incentive to guard against risk because one is protected from the consequences of that risk. So an example of that might be insurance. I'm going to be talking to Gernot Wagner, an economist and professor at NYU, who argues that placing too much emphasis on technology fixes for global warming is a green moral hazard. So, Professor Wagner, welcome to the interview.
Great to be here.
Look, you've recently written a paper about green moral hazards. Can you give us an overview of the paper, please?
So you mentioned the word techno-fix. And yes, every technological fix, every sort of solution, if you will, that doesn't truly address the root cause of a problem often comes with some form of moral hazard. And frankly, it goes in a lot of different directions. So insurance is one, and it's sort of a classic one. That's the definition of moral hazard that economists have. Seatbelts is another. Right? You put on a seatbelt, turns out on average, now you are encouraged to drive faster. Condoms is another, right? So there's lots and lots of examples. Now, it's hard to look at every one of these and say, right, that's a techno-fix in itself. But frankly, many of these quote unquote solutions that don't truly address the root cause have at least this flavor. And of course, for environmental problems, right, we see these over and over and over again.
So let's make this practical if we can. So there are folks, and I see them on my Twitter feed all the time, and I might even veer into this now that I think about it. Their argument is, I don't really have to worry about climate change much because we're going to, in the 2030s, 2040s, sometime, we're going to have the technology. We'll maybe suck carbon out of the air. And so because I believe that, I don't have the incentive then to change my behavior or to get better technology today, because I think somebody else is going to solve the problem for us with a giant carbon vacuum cleaner at some point. And is that an example?
Yes, right. It actually is an example that exhibits this moral hazard, and frankly, very, very clearly. Now, I might add immediately that carbon removal, this technology, air capture, right, sucking CO2 out of thin air. Yes, it's technologically feasible. It also sounds pretty expensive, and it turns out it is, right? So in many ways, air capture is expensive mitigation, right? It's cutting CO2 emissions after the fact and doing so in, frankly, a very expensive form. So if you'll then line up your mitigation options, yes, air capture will be one of them, but at the very end, on the expensive end. So in other words, no, pointing to air capture should not detract from the need to cut emissions in the first place.
So the problem here is that we need to have the incentive to act, and we need to feel that that hasn't been lessened somehow by our reliance on future technological fixes. Now, I've argued in the past that bad technology is the root of the problem, and only better technology is going to fix it. Am I setting myself up? Am I making a moral hazard argument?
Well, there's always a flavor to it, of course, but that doesn't mean you are wrong about saying we need better technologies. I would say beggars can't be choosers, right? We need it all, right? So it's sort of this, this endless debate about behavioral changes or policy versus technology. It's not or, it's not versus, it's both. We know we need both, right? Or just go back to air capture yet again. How are we ever going to get air capture going? We need the incentives. We need a price per ton of CO2 that doesn't have to be a carbon tax or cap and trade system. It can be very direct regulation. It can basically be a mandate, right? That says, in order for you to keep pumping oil, you have to capture at least as much CO2, right? That could easily be a rule the government of Alberta could pass. And that would make it happen, of course. But the point is, we need something like this, right? We need a carbon tax, a carbon price, a mandate to get air capture going, right? So no, we can't just sit around and wish for somebody to suck it out one day, right? We need to actively pursue policy that actually makes it happen.
So am I understanding your argument correctly? You're positioning I guess yourself or your argument in between those who are, blind believers in technology. We don't have to do anything because we'll be saved down the road. And those who are arguing, and I have seen these, that behavior change is the only thing that will save us. We immediately have to, eschew fossil fuels, and we, have to bike everywhere and on and on and on. Is that, if you recognize the green moral hazard, is that where you wind up in that middle position?
So yes, so first of all, of course, it's always good to be taking the reasonable position in the middle, right? So yes, thank you very much, right? I do that here too. But yes, right? So we know it's a mix of both, right? So you're looking here quite literally at, the full 70 square meters I share with my wife and 2 kids, right? Does that mean everybody has to live that way? Well, no, of course not. But is it good to be vegetarian and live in the middle of a city where you don't depend on a car and so on and so forth? Yes, of course, right? That's true too. But it's certainly not the solution to climate change to simply prescribe for everyone to forego eating meat, right? No, but yes, there's a negative externality. We should price the negative externality. And technology, of course, plays a key role too, right? It's not either or, it's definitely both. And frankly, once you go down that route, right, and you sort of have this huge menu of options, well, the real question now is, right, how much should we act overall? How bad is it? How much do we need to do, right? Is it literally everything all at once right now? Or is it hey, we need to set a price per ton of CO2. We need to set a clean electricity standard. We need to do lots and lots of different things. We need to phase out internal combustion engines by 2035, right? Germany and California and other countries are doing as we speak. And then some. Right? So basically, the real question, as so often, right, is not this ideological, oh, we all have to do this, or we all should be doing this. It's a question of how do you pursue the right mix in the right circumstances. For some, right, I like living in New York. I like my downtown loft here. Pretty darn amazing to live here. Turns out lots of people want to live here too, right? That's why real estate prices are so enormous and so on and so forth. But no, it's not for everyone, right? We need to realize that too, of course.
Well, Professor Wagner, thank you very much for this. Really appreciate your insights into a complex issue. And hopefully we've provided some thoughts for folks as they examine their own green moral hazards. Thank you very much.
Thank you.